Hey guys, this story is called I'm a Search and Rescue Officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I have some stories to tell. This is the final update for now. Things have deteriorated here to a degree that I didn't foresee. I didn't know how much writing about the things that are happening out here would affect every single part of my life, and maybe that was stupid of me. Maybe I should have considered it more seriously, but I honestly just thought I was writing about things that a few people would want to hear. I didn't think it would get this much attention. People ask me about the stairs now. It doesn't happen every day, but when it does happen, I never really know what to say. My bosses know someone is talking about them, and I'm sure that if they know, the higher ups know, and I can tell you that they aren't happy about it. I've been formally told that I am not to speak a word about them to anyone anymore. Which is part of the reason why this has to be my final update. I can't risk my job for this. As much as it's been wonderful to get a lot of these things off my mind, I still do love my work and I need to be out here. If anything, my being aware of what's really going on is enough reason to stick it out. I may not be able to tell people that they're out there, but if I see them, I can directly traffic away to somewhere safer. Because of the amount of attention the stories have gotten, I've heard a lot of stories being swapped back and forth. I've heard so many I can't even remember most of them. The ones I do remember are the ones that I wish I could forget. One story that's made the rounds here was about a young woman who disappeared upstate. Initially, everyone assumed she was a runaway. She didn't come from a great home life, and so it really wasn't any kind of surprise that she chose to cut and run. But people started coming forward, saying that they've seen her around the park shortly before she vanished. So some of the rangers in the area were sent out to make sure she hadn't hung herself or something in any of the back trails. It took them a while, but they did find her. Well, not all of her, just half of her tongue and a quarter of the lower jaw. Very clean cuts, from what I heard. They've never found the rest of her. So many stories about children, so many of them going missing and turning up in cave wedges in between impossibly tight spaces. So many of them found on mountain peaks or at the bottom of sheer gullies, missing shoes, missing socks, or found with both in perfect condition despite them being miles and miles away from where they vanished. So many stories of black-eyed people wandering around the woods and calling out in the night, mimicking the sound of running water or a bobcat screaming. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him, and he tells the same story. He was deer hunting, had camped out in a very remote area, and woke up because something was scraping against his tent. He thought it was a raccoon or a fox, until the thing pressed its face against the door of the tent, at which point he could very clearly make out a human nose and mouth. He kicked at it, but it leaped back and was gone by the time he opened the tent flap. Gun at his side, he fired 2 warning shots, and when the sound had faded, he heard a snap behind him. A man was standing at the edge of the campsite. This man was not wearing any clothing, but he also didn't possess any human kind of flesh. As this hunter described it, the man was made of some kind of amalgamation of raw meat and hair, as if someone had scooped up a roadkill and molded it into the vague shape of a man. The face was lumpy and only a rough approximation of a human face. The thing opened its lopsided mouth, and from came the sound of the gun of the hunter had fired. It did this twice before mimicking the sound of the tent zipper and fleeing into the night. A young couple out for a hike in the rocky areas of my park reported to me yesterday that they had seen something strange out on a peak I'm very familiar with. They were taking turns looking through the pair of binoculars when the man noticed a hiker climbing up a very steep part of the cliff face. He watched the man scale the slope, and it didn't occur to him until the incident was over that this person had no climbing gear. When the climber reached to the top of the peak, which was about 5 miles away, they turned and faced the young man. He said whoever or whatever this person was looking right at them. The climber waved in an exaggerated manner before snapping in half at the waist, sideways, and leaping off the peak. The young man didn't see where the climber landed. I sent them on their way with assurances that I'd check it out. I lied. I won't be turning in a report because there are 10 other exact like it. The climber is well known in that area, and I don't question it anymore. There are so many things I won't ever be able to understand about my job, and it would take me years to relate to all the things I've heard in the last few months. When I feel like my job isn't in jeopardy, I will come back. It may be a different format, but I will come back. Thank you all for sticking by my side and enjoying the things I've talked about. If you go out into the woods, I encourage you to be safe. Bring water, food, survival equipment. Let people know where you're going, and when you're back, don't go uncharted paths unless you know exactly what you're doing. And above all, don't touch them. Don't look at them. Don't go up them. There's another little story at the end of this that someone replied, and I feel like I should read this. I'm reading this with you guys for the first time, so I'm excited to see what this is about. It looks good. Okay, so it's from the Chad 92. Me and my friend used to go out to the outskirts of this forest highway, got dropped off by one of our friends, and go survive for a week. We'd always mark where we were going, and we'd go deeper and deeper every time. It was really fun at first, hiking for a couple of hours, marking trees with our knives, then making a shelter, fire, and then do it all again. On the last day we'd hike back to the road and our friend would pick us up. One time, we were looking for food, berries, or like a chipmunk or something, when we found this random pond. Just picture huge pine trees and then some bushes. Go through the bushes and then this random pond about 50 yards long, but no creek running up to it, and it was way out in the middle of nowhere. We didn't think too much of it because it was our third night out and we haven't really eaten anything good, so we thought there might be some fish or something. So we camped out next to the pond for the night. We built a little shelter in a couple of hours, and then we got a little fire going. We stayed up looking at the stars through the clearing that the pond made in the trees, and then we drifted off to sleep. I woke up to a huge splash, so I got up really quick to look. The moon was giving off a little light, and I saw these ripples going through the pond like someone jumped in. Looked to my friend T, and he was gone. So I start to freak out and call his name. He comes out from behind. He's saying, "What's going on?" He had to take a piss. I told him about the splash, and he laughed and said I was dreaming. He said we should go to sleep, so I laid back down and stared at the pond, which was reflecting the quarter moon that was out. Just as I'm about to drift off into sleep, I see something dark from the opposite side of the water scurry into the pond. I couldn't make out what it was though, so leaned over T and asked if he saw that, and he was fast asleep. I wanted to write it off as a turtle or something, but it looked a lot bigger. We were deep in the woods, so I didn't think turtles would be there. I was freaked out. I didn't want to seem like a pussy, so I just stared at the pond, hoping to drift to sleep and wake up and start to hike back. As I was staring, I see something dark poke out of the water and start to very, very slowly come towards our side. It was getting darker now, as the moon was breaking over the tree line, and I wasn't going to find out what it was in the complete dark, so I looked for an emergency flashlight on the ground, found it, picked it up, turned it on to the direction of the pond, and nothing. No ripples, nothing in the water. At this point, I thought I was crazy, so I woke up T and told him we had to go. He was groggy, but he didn't like the feeling around the pond either. So we decided, well, just get an early start on going back since the sun should be up in a couple of hours. About 3 minutes into walking back on our trail we made, we heard a huge splash. Looking around to see what it was, we thought there is no way it could have been the pond. We're too far now, unless something huge was making that splash. At the same time, we looked at each other and got this awful feeling that we should just run. Like instinct kicked in, and without saying a word and just nodding at each other, and we bolted. I have never run so fast in my life. Using our flashlight now to look for the marked trees and just running around, about 5 minutes later we stop and take a breath and hear a loud but faint low bellowing howl like a wolf, but with so much bass and depth it seemed very far from us, but so creepy. The worst part is we still had about a day hike to get back to the road. We jogged what seemed like the whole day because we just wanted to get out of the woods. Finally, around dusk, we finally reached the road, turned on our emergency phone, and called our buddy. Taking about half an hour to get there, and we never went back. Well, that was very interesting. I hope you guys enjoy the stories, and sweet nightmares.